welcome everybody. We were really thrilled to have you here tonight to talk about what's going on with school boards. I don't think I have to tell you that school boards have been at the pinnacle of the culture wars in our education system across the country. And Virginia has been, I continually hear about when I listen to podcasts and they talk about the problems with schools across the country, they always happen to mention Virginia. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's not really a good thing, only because there's bad reasons why we get mentioned. Although they do talk about the governor's victory in 2021 and how that tends to be sort of a tipping point for what is happening now as parents and legislators and just general citizens are pushing against what's going on in our school systems. This evening, we're fortunate enough to have Nancy Smith, who's with the Middle Resolution PAC. Nancy is a veteran campaign manager from back as far as 2009. And she's been working with the Middle Resolution for since 2012, and has run all kinds of campaigns from school board races all the way up to congressional races. So she has an immense amount of experience. Last year, the Middle Resolution PAC decided to get involved in school board races. And we're fortunate today to have Kathleen Brown with us today, who was in Virginia Beach. She won her race actually in a district that was not favorable to a conservative school board member. But she worked very, very hard and is now on that board and is doing some wonderful things. We also have Dennis Barlow, who is the chair of the school board in Shenandoah County in Virginia, and he's been on that board for approximately about a year and a half. And we've been working with Dennis for the last several months. He's got a number of candidates running in Shenandoah, and Nancy will probably talk a little bit about that in her comments. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to turn this over to Nancy, and then we're going to have Kathleen and Dennis share a little bit about themselves and what they're experiencing on school boards in their counties, and then we'll go to the questions. And before I turn it over to Nancy, just so you know, I'm Craig DeSessa, and I am the Executive Director of the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, which is a project of the Middle Resolution Policy Foundation, not to be mixed up with the Middle Resolution PAC, although we are all work together on both those entities. So Nancy, why don't you go ahead and share with us a little bit about what the Middle Resolution is doing with school board races this year.
Okay, thank you, Craig. And I'll just a bit of a disclaimer, because I will be talking about candidates. This is Middle Resolution PAC speaking to this, so we do try and keep these entities aligned the way that they're supposed to be in terms of tax status. So we in Middle Resolution decided to get involved in school board races last year. As we all know, on the heels of COVID, things changed pretty dramatically. I think the floodgates opened of what parents and stakeholders and constituents all saw in terms of how the schools are really functioning, and certainly the learning loss that was a result of COVID. Kids being out of school for up to a year, virtual learning certainly not being optimal for most children, and also concerns about instruction, how administrations were running their school divisions, school closures, masking, all of the things that we all went through, sort of watching either with children in the division or certainly watching from afar. So we got involved in races last year as a bit of a pilot. And some of you may or may not know that most elections for school board are this year because they are by and large counties. Virginia has mostly counties, but there are some cities, and there's some large cities like Virginia Beach, like Chesapeake, mostly in the eastern part of the state, and a few sprinkled around the rest of the state. And so we decided to get involved in some races last year. Kathleen Brown, who is on with us in Virginia Beach, was one of our star candidates and just really rose to the occasion in a very, very tough district and prevailed. So we were just really thrilled to get into some races. There were candidates we met who were actually already heading towards victory by the time we met them, and we just had a chance to speak with them, wish them well, give them an endorsement. And then others, we spent considerable resources and got really involved in their campaigns. So on the heels of some good victories from last year, we decided to get involved again this year. And once we put feelers out, again, the floodgates opened and candidates started pouring in, many of whom are on here tonight that we've spoken with or we're actively working with. So there are literally hundreds of school board races this year. There are hundreds of candidates running, and there are many localities, anywhere from small rural school districts to the big, huge counties of Fairfax and Loudoun, where incumbent seats are being challenged. So there's no lack of candidates. And we are, I will just sort of say for Craig and for the rest of us at Middle Resolution, we are thrilled that average citizens have stepped up to run for something they never thought they might do, might never be in elected office, but have really stepped up to sort of fill the slots that we need to really turn the ship in Virginia. With the candidates that we are getting behind, there are a couple of things that we do in terms of meeting with them and helping them with a campaign, but really urging them to run very grassroots campaigns. And I tell candidates there are only two things that should take the majority of your time: fundraising and knocking doors. Fundraising, knock doors, make the phone calls. Everything else needs to be handled by volunteers, by a spouse, by other people. It's hard to be your own campaign manager and be the candidate. So we really work hard to make sure people know that you've got to get to the voters, you've got to make your case to the voters, and you've got to raise the money to be able to do that. You simply can't run a campaign without some funding. There are races from last year and this year that will be races where potentially someone can win with $5,000 to $7,000, maybe $10,000. There are also races where it's now upwards of $65,000, $75,000 to run a competitive race, which seems like an extraordinary amount of money. And it is, because when you're as far down ballot as a school board candidate is, you're certainly not running the kind of race that a delegate or a senator can run, or even someone on the board of supervisors. You're pretty far down ballot, but you've got to really sort of get out there and raise that money to be competitive in the environment that we're in, where parents really do want change. And there's a real difference of ideologies with the candidates. So they're expensive ventures now. I think it will be this way for a few years, that the competition for these seats will only increase until I think there are a lot of boards that are pretty comfortable with how their divisions are doing. And hopefully parents and teachers and staff and administrators are happy with the direction of education in Virginia. The key issues are the ones that you would expect, and I would say they're fairly uniform across the state. Parental rights tops the list. Most of them know that parents have either been left out, ignored, or perhaps marginally listened to when it comes to how education is running in their locality. And most of the members, most of the candidates really want to make sure that they are putting the parents front and center with the education in their counties. Safety, of course, is a big one. Safety in the schools on the heels of certainly the tragedies we've seen in Virginia, Newport News being one of the more recent ones where a teacher was shot, and just overall sort of the whole, the whole continuum now of schools being places where children are not totally safe. And so most of the candidates are running on an appeal to safety, to make sure that their buildings are secure, their staff are secure, and that there may be expenditures for that. And they're going to look hard at those budgets to make sure that the safety is one of the key priorities. As you would imagine, ideology is a big part of this, and there are significantly different ideologies in terms of sort of the culture war, indoctrination, certainly things that never used to be part of education that have now sort of come about. And so many of them have constituents who are saying they really want education for their children back to basics. And almost every candidate, I can say faithfully and truly, are saying we have got to get back to the basic fundamentals of education. There are only so many hours in a school day. And when time is taken away from education, from true education to other issues, then that's time wasted that a child can never get back. So that's a really big, really big issue. So, on that, the candidates are, sometimes they are running against an incumbent or a new candidate, a challenger like themselves, and they're running really head to head on ideology. And I would say, without getting into party politics, that there's a real difference in what some candidates believe who are on the ballot. In some cases, however, there is a real sense, and I would say there are quite a few counties where there's a real difference in terms of remaining sort of a locality with the status quo. Change is never easy. People don't like to have things upset. The community doesn't like that, but I think most people are willing to sort of see things changed up. But in many cases, there are candidates who are running who are the change agents that need to come along and really change the policies in their school divisions. And there are incumbents who really are fairly comfortable with keeping things as they are. So that's sort of the battle that's going on in some localities. These are all good people who are on school boards for all the right reasons. But the willingness to change is really coming from the challengers who want to make significant changes. In many localities, and this is not unusual now to hear, is that many localities have deferred to the superintendent, and it may be that Kathleen or Dennis will speak to this, have deferred to the superintendent for decades. Education is no simple matter anymore in terms of the funding, federal, state, local funding. The policies are incredibly complex. So it's not an easy job, but there's a real sense for most candidates that the superintendent really needs to align with the policies that are adopted by the school board, the curriculum. The school boards have a lot of authority in terms of curriculum and approving that. So there's a real sense of we need to work together as a team with our superintendent instead of being told this is how it works here. So again, I think we will see substantial changes with new candidates coming in. So last thing I'll mention is, of course, we are working hard to make sure the candidates understand that with 45 days of early voting in Virginia, that you got to be ready. Your campaign has to be ready to rock and roll by September 22nd, which is the first day of early voting. So unfortunately, with 45 long days, that's a long tenure to be pushing your voters out and have gotten your message to them. But that's sort of where we are in Virginia right now. And so these candidates have to be really prepared. And we're saying your mail has to be ready to run. You have to have really gotten to those doors while you're working through October, so that no one walks in and gets the ballot and has no idea who you are as they tick through the many offices that are up this year. So like I said, Senate and House candidates are going to get the lion's share of airtime and just their presence because they've got some pretty tough races. But when you go down the ballot, we want to make sure that voters know who those school board candidates are, that they're not a name they don't recognize, and then they potentially don't vote for them because they are unsure of who's actually running. So an early vote program is really pretty critical this year. So happy to take any questions as we go and look forward to a great conversation.
Thanks, Nancy. I really appreciate that overview. I'd like to go to Kathleen Brown next. Kathleen, share a little bit about your race last year and then also your experience on the board.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Nancy and Craig, for putting this on and inviting me. This is really important. This is really about the future generation and our children. And so I think when we talk about this, it's easy for people to have emotions that run high. So it's very, very important. So I'm a mother of 4. We have a blended family, my husband and I, and 3 of our children are in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration. I'm currently also working on a master's in public policy. I very first became interested in the school board actually in 2019 when they decided they wanted to raise taxes or ask city council rather to increase taxes to fund an initiative outside of their existing budget. And then I went back to the school board during COVID when my son asked me to go to the school board and speak on his behalf. And I told him, I'm sorry, they're not going to hear what I have to say. And the reality is that knowledge that parents are being pushed out of the discussion and the community is pushed out is part of what made me so interested. And it was pretty wild when I got there. So My parents have been grassroots going back to the late 1980s. I've spent my life door knocking for candidates, going to parades, waving signs, and doing whatever it took to really show support for candidates that run. And that includes school board when I was younger. Because that's what my parents made the decision to do, and it was important to them. I became interested in Virginia Beach, though, like I said, and I watched the campaigns, and I realized that a lot of the campaigns were very cookie cutter. Regardless of what the district seemed to look like, it was run the same way, same signs, same commercials, same consultants. My district is very unique. It is 67% Democrats, a majority minority district. And in fact, I was told quite often that I couldn't win it. But, here I am. I did win that race, and I did that by meeting the people. That's really important to do. I knocked on the doors, as Nancy mentioned. Door knocking is so important. I would say that I knocked on over 5,000 doors. I don't have an early tally in my initial days of campaigning from door knocking. I only was keeping track towards the final months, so I don't really have 100% firm grasp on that. But I talked about my experience as a parent. I talked about how badly I was treated by the school board. I talked about how they lied to the community, and how I did a Freedom of Information Act request, and how I held up their emails and said that they lied to us. And, there was no apology, there's no accountability. And so that got me involved. And when I went to those doors, besides just telling them about my experiences, I also listened. I listened to people that weren't traditional conservative voters and understand where their concerns and my concerns and our concerns ultimately align. And what I came to find out is that when it comes to being treated with respect, wanting a better life for our children, and wanting accountability in the schools, we have a lot in common. Everybody wants the same thing for their children. They want the best life for them possible. And so, when you present that to them, it is very difficult for them to argue with that. There will be a couple people, but so that was the thing. And so far as challenges in the race, or on the school board, right now we have a 5-5-1 previously, with one in the moderate, but it's been more kind of a 5-6 Democrat majority on the school board. So it's been a little bit of a challenge with the back and forth there. We are still experiencing some micro victories. I was serving on the policy review committee since February, and I am still appointed to that, although there is a majority shift on that committee now. And we've been able to take back some of that power a little at a time. Nancy had mentioned when she was talking about how a lot of school boards will give their authority to the superintendent, and there is actually case law that if that is in your policy, that the superintendent has that authority. Unless you change your policy, it is assumed that you are okay with what they are doing. So it's always good when it comes to policy to make sure that you're putting as much of that into those policies as possible. It's actually really, really important. So the board makeup is one of the challenges. The social issues focus. I think a lot of people really want their kids to be able to do reading, writing, math, the sciences. And, there's a lot of focus at the school board level on the social issues. And so that's a challenge. And then the lack of transparency sometimes, in fact, here recently, there was a request to go into closed session to discuss something that is of controversy. And I did not agree with that. We were able to not go into closed session on that particular topic, which is really great news. But, we have a school board that's gotten comfortable with going behind closed doors when it comes to things that the public really should be involved in. So those are some really important things for me that I'm looking to fix. We are winning some victories as far as workforce development goes. We have a committee now, we're starting that. we have some new programs that we are expected to vote on. I anticipate a unanimous vote on those workforce development programs coming up at this particular upcoming meeting. But, one of the things that I would say too, when it comes to campaigns, you mentioned needing volunteers, and it's really important that you have volunteers and that people are really helping people. But another thing that's really important is candidates are going to need some money to get that campaign going. And it can be hard sometimes, especially for a school board candidate, to make that ask for money. My race, it ended up costing, by the time all was said and done, after the race was over, nearly $30,000. So it can get expensive. And like you guys had mentioned, depending on your district, some races won't need as much as others do. But when you are in a district like mine, you're going to have to pull every single stop out to win that race. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. You bring up some really good points. The fundraising is critical when we meet with candidates. The knocking, Nancy said, is knocking the doors and raising money are two of the most important things that you can do. It's all about name recognition. And the way you do that is you knock doors and you raise money to get your name out there with mailers, whatever it is, whatever you choose to do, texting, digital, whatever. So you ran an exceptional race last year, and we were very pleased to see your victory. And you're doing a great job. From everything I'm hearing from your cohorts on the board and some of the folks that are in Virginia Beach that are not on the board that helped with the campaigns have said as well that you're doing a great job. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Now, Dennis, why don't you share with us a little bit about yourself and what you're experiencing on your board?
Sure. Thanks, Craig. The first thing I want to disabuse the notion that I'm the chairman. I'm the vice chair.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay. No. Next year I hope to be chair. So
Okay.
I hope to make you a profit. I was elected a year and a half ago, and I'm kind of an old geezer, but I had a 14-year career as a teacher, coach in Baltimore County Public Schools. But I was pretty disgusted with public schools then. Returned to the Army, where I was made a policy planner in the Pentagon. So I retired as a colonel, and I don't want to tell you when, but that was another 14-year career. And then I went to James Madison University and started a public policy center for getting rid of landmines around the world. So I had a 14-year career as a diplomat. And I learned a lot doing those three things, so that during my my final gig, I really wanted to go into the school board and see what we could do to turn this mess back around where we should be. And so got elected a year and a half ago. So let's leave me behind now. Talk about some of the challenges we met. It was a totally liberal board, 5-1, 5 liberals and 1 moderate. And I came in, we stagger, so we have 3 every 2 years. And I'm happy to say that the 3 conservatives swept into office. And so we made it suddenly 3-3. And so the last year and a half, because it's kind of been a stalemate, but on the other hand, we've won a bunch of victories by working with the one or other who tend to be moderate on certain issues. We were able to get a return from the 70s of weekday religious education. So kids were released from school at the end to be able to do go to Christian or other, in this case, it was Christian religious education. We unmasked almost immediately, quicker than almost anybody. We passed a library challenge policy whereby our citizens are allowed to challenge the books in our library, and we're now voting on library selection process to be overseen by the parents, and that's looking good. So it's taken a lot of work to try to get those accomplished, and a lot of compromise with a 3-3 and a 6-person board. I would like to say that as far as the superintendent is concerned, I've really figured out, I think I figured out, that the superintendent is not our enemy. and superintendent is not necessarily our friend. The superintendent has a different job than we have. And being one of our 2 employees, we set the standards for the superintendent. One of the things we did was we required as one of her evaluation points that our academic standard raise. And without that, her evaluation was going to suffer. And so that has prompted her to start a bunch of programs that we think are very, very positive in terms of turning academic around, and also discipline. Hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think discipline bothers parents probably more than anything else. Lack of or unfair application of. Tie this into elections a little bit. I hope that what we could do, Craig, and with Nancy's help and others, Glenn Youngkin's PAC endorsed me last time, and that was of enormous help for me to be able to campaign, whether I door knocked or whatever, to be able to say that Youngkin's PAC endorsed me was massive. And I'm not sure how that can be accomplished again this year, but I sure hope it could be, because it brought me and another one of my fellows into office. I also think that the work that Nancy Smith has done with the middle resolution with our candidates this time has been superlative. She's been incredible at helping our 3 conservative candidates get kind of stitched together and run county-wide. Shenandoah County is a large, fairly rural county. And so by stitching their efforts together and running as a team, they've been quite successful the last few weeks. So kudos to Nancy for helping those guys pull that off. One of the challenges, and I don't know if anybody's going to want to hear this or not, but it's been a hard time to get our the Republican committee of Shenandoah County to endorse. We have no idea why, but they're making the this seem like some sort of labyrinth we have to go through to get the endorsements. And we all believe the Republican creed, and so do our conservative candidates. So that's kind of a tough nut to crack. I've been on our local committee for 12 years as a leader, executive committee, et cetera, precinct leader, district leader. And for some reason, I guess part of it is kind of an old feeling that, you know, the school board shouldn't be political. Well, good luck with that. The world is political. And whether or not it's partisan, it's certainly liberal and conservative ideals that are involved in this great culture war. And it's mind-boggling to me that we can't get Republican rank and file, even in a conservative county, to kind of buy into that, which I think would be great for not only name recognition, but for handouts and for ballot exposure. I would say that one of the challenges that faces school board members is dealing with a lawyer. He's our second employee. I've been disappointed in the lawyers that we run into, and they are not advocates for us as much as I want them to be. They claim to call balls and strikes. This is some, but some I've come across, rather than being advocates. When I was on the joint staff, Colin Powell made sure that our lawyers were our advocates. I didn't just call balls and strikes. And we need our lawyers to be able to help us get some of these understood and get some of these concepts out in the open with us and for us. I will hold it right there for any other questions and be ready to drive on from that point.
Dennis, thank you so much for your comments, and we'd love to go to questions. But first, before we do that, I would like to introduce our Lieutenant Governor. Winsome Sears has joined us. And Lieutenant Governor, would you like to share a few things with us?
There, now I've unmuted. Thank you all for being on this call. Thank you, Middle Resolution, for putting this together and for always being in the fight. And I want to thank also the candidates, our school board candidates. It never used to be this way for you to run for school board and suddenly you're in a huge war. But, you know, I guess I could say they brought the fight to us. And we're going to make sure that we win, because we have to hold the people who make the decisions accountable, the ones who made themselves judge and jury over our children. And they are our children, and we want to make sure that they have skills that are marketable, that will get them a good job, if nothing else, so that they can get out of the house, and so that they can have a future, for goodness sake, and not all of this other stuff, which is just that stuff. And you are in the line of fire. That's just the way it is. But we thank you so very much for, as I like to say, getting out of the bleacher seats and getting into the arena and fighting for our children. We're not giving up on our children. We can't afford to. You actually are the very boots on the ground that we need, not really me. I have another role to play, but my goodness, you're there formulating the ins and the outs of what will be taught, how it will be taught, to whom it will be taught. So you're part of this, and I thank you. I'm hearing, of course, you're having to knock on doors, you're having to raise money, and it's difficult because the delegates are raising money, the candidates, the nominees for Senate are raising money. Heavens, the governor is raising money, the rest, everybody's raising money. And, the board of supervisors, this, that, everybody's raising money. And here you come asking for money as well. But, it's a worthwhile endeavor. And I say, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I see on the call, for example, that there are people, for example, like Mill Resolution, who supported me early on, and also Dan and Paula Chang, they were in my corner from the very beginning, you could say, and they're still here fighting. And that's because these things are important. And we're talking about a life. You're looking at a very specific purpose, a life. So thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of this. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. We really appreciate you joining our call today and encouraging the folks on this call. You're doing an incredible job. And if you don't know this already, she has been one of the other initiatives we have at the Middle Resolution is trying to pass legislation from our PAC side to provide more education choice for parents and children in Virginia. And she has been our number one supporter down at the General Assembly. So I want to thank you so much for that. All
Yes,
right.
sir. When I filed that amicus brief along with the the Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson of North Carolina, we were called everything but children of God, because we just felt that we played these color games on affirmative action already and they don't work. And so we wanted to make sure that Asian children had the same opportunity as everybody else's children, and white children and Latino children, everybody. We don't want to keep going back. So yeah, they castigated me for that, but it's one more thing, and we want school choice, and we want it now. We want parents to finally make that decision, and we're going to get it. We're going to keep fighting. So thank you for staying in the fight.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. All right, I'd like to go to the questions now. We got a number of questions as people registered. And so I want to go ahead and get started. I got a number of questions that have to do with how to help candidates running for school board. And I think I want to go to Nancy with this one. And then if Kathleen and Dennis want to chime in, that'd be great. But what are the one or two things? And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I think it's important that we reiterate things that people can do to help school board candidates. Nancy, what would you say are the most important things people can do?
Well, we sort of talked about it, and the Lieutenant Governor and Kathleen and others have sort of reiterated the effect of meeting the voters at the doors. There's even though we sort of live on this, this social media thing that's come about over the last couple of decades, a lot of keyboard warriors, a lot of people believe that you can reach your voters, excuse me, in ways that aren't traditional. And there's nothing like face-to-face contact with someone. There's nothing like communicating with someone And as Kathleen said, understanding their concerns, what you as a candidate may think you want to run on may not be what the parents care about, may not be what teachers care about. And if you're not listening to them first, then your campaign could go sideways because you're really talking about issues that the community just doesn't care about. And so you may not think they're the most important. They may not be the things that you're passionate about. But if you don't listen to the parents and understand where they're coming from, then number one, you're at risk of losing, but they will distance themselves from you going, you don't understand. People don't understand. The other thing, and I've told candidates recently, is that you can insulate yourself from criticism by your opponent if you meet them and you talk to them. So even if they run negative mail, they're hitting you on Facebook, they are saying negative things about you that are not true, there's some insulation from meeting someone, because people who meet someone and their first instinct is, I like you, I like what you're saying, that will help. That will go a long ways in case your campaign goes negative, not of your doing, but by your opponent. And so just getting out and speaking to those voters, and sometimes it's not always at the doors, they're meet and greets, they're events, they're fairs, they're festivals, everything where you can meet the people who are going to vote for you. Last thing I'll say on this is that a lot of us in politics live in these vacuums. And most people are not in a political vacuum. Most people are going about living their lives, just wanting their kids to do well. So in your campaign, if you're going to events where you're seeing the same 20, 30 people that you already know, that have already maybe given you a little money, they're always going to vote for you, then you go into the wrong events. You've got to go out and really meet people who are outside of that sphere, outside the political sphere, and make sure you're getting to those voters for election day.
All right, thanks, Nancy. We've got a number of questions concerning the governor's model policies that just came out on parental rights. And so, Kathleen, does the school board have to adopt those policies, or do they have flexibility in adopting part of the policy? Can they completely reject the policy and develop their own? How does that work?
So the truth is I do not believe that we can reject them. I believe that we need to adopt them in their complete form, exactly as they are written. I think that they protect the rights of parents and the children too. Some school boards have already stated that they were going to reject them, and our very own school board has passed narrowly passed a resolution that didn't exactly indicate that we wouldn't be adopting them, but said they weren't going to adopt them. We currently have a resolution up in Virginia Beach to adopt them word for word. We will see how that pans out when we get there to the vote. But as far as what I understand, there are some decisions to be made, but the policies are pretty clear in them that you can adopt these policies or something stronger, not something weaker. So I'm looking forward to getting 6 votes because the school board was eager to inhale the policies of the last administration. So I think that we should make sure that we put those forward.
Can you share just a little bit about the difference between what the Northam policies, and you don't have to go into detail, but the major differences of the 2 different policies?
So one of the major differences to me, and one of the most important differences, is that currently our school division is allowing students to come to the division with a different name and pronoun and ask that the division keep that a secret from the parents. And one of the main differences that I see is that the new Glenn Youngkin model policies doesn't say that you cannot go by a different name or pronoun, but that rather your parent needs to be on board with that decision. And schools don't belong playing the role of the parent. So
Yeah.
and then there's some bathroom and locker room provisions.
Right.
You know, you can opt out if there's going to be somebody that is a different biological sex in the restroom or locker room with you. That's another big provision of that. But, you know, really just putting parents back in the driver's seat after they've been taken out of that driver's seat for so long.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And I think it's just nuanced. The another question somebody asked, and this is really for people that are they're wanting to support candidates. What are one or two good questions? And maybe Dennis, this is a question for you that people get when they go to a forum where there's, you know, the candidates are sitting there and they have an opportunity to ask what people have an opportunity to ask questions. What are one or two good questions that they should ask those candidates?
Well, I don't know what they should ask, but I know that they're always interested in the discipline question. They're always interested in parental rights. And I think more than anything else, they're interested in just seeing that their kid is safe at school and that they're being taught things that are not nasty, negative. But I think the question that we would most like to be prepared for or to meet, the problem is that our candidates or our opponents, I should say, are coming at this as if they're moderates. They're speaking conservative, and they're not. They're speaking conservative-ese, but it's masking very left-wing policies. And so I think behooves our candidates to draw sharp distinctions between the support that we give to parental rights, to transparency, to higher academic standards, to high safety standards in school, that we call out the liberals and the liberal positions for what they are, and try to make a very, very stark difference between the two. Because if you give those liberals a chance, they will do everything they can to obfuscate the answer, to make it sound like it's one child every day. I mean, it's pure pablum, but it's what they trade in. And so holding them to more conservative specifics is a winner. And I think I'll speak for our district. It's pretty bedrock conservative, and people have had enough. So that when they're talked to in terms of parental rights and in terms of staying away from these experimental left-wing models, then we're on the right track. I would like to say quickly about the new model policy. The VSBA may have actually done us a favor last year, because when most of the Dominion accepted the code for the model policy, they minimized what you'd have to do to adhere to it. And so it's my understanding that we don't have to do anything right now for this model policy except make it better. And it can be, we can do lots of things to improve on what Governor Youngkin has proposed to the VDOE here. But the good news is we're kind of starting from the position where this policy is already in place. And so I think that kind of gives us a leg up to begin our massaging and modifying of it to make it even better case by case and division by division.
Yeah, going back to your comments about the liberals sort of masquerading as centrists, Nancy, you want to share a little bit about We the People for Education?
Yeah, we are, and some of you in the audience may have some updated information, but there was a PAC that started, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. And so of course it got on our radar because we have been waiting for money to start flowing into Virginia. We are a very high profile state across the country. There are people across the country who look at Virginia, not only because we have traditionally been a bellwether state, which we will be again this year, heading into the presidential, but because Loudoun County put Virginia on the map. And sometimes I wish that Virginia wasn't on the map. I wish we weren't a state that they had to look at and say, what in the world is going on in Virginia? But Loudoun County became a national issue. So when it comes to money is, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, money is hugely important in elections. You don't have to have all the money, but you've got to have some money to run a campaign. And so when we saw another group step up, that was sort of an alert to us that there could be money coming in to candidates that we don't support. So we're watching and waiting. I do know of another national group, I don't recall the name, who are also starting to put money into school board races. Again, low profile, as Dennis has said, typically people just don't care about school board races. They're either longtime incumbents in a community, or they just simply don't rise to the level of state politics and national politics. But now they're hugely important because there's a real change of heart in Virginia and across our country. There's a real turn going on. And I think what we see going forward is education is going to look very different. It's already looking different, but I think we're going to see education in Virginia looking different under different circumstances and additional leadership. So we're waiting to see. So We the People is a group. It is made up of Governor Northam's wife, Senator Kane's wife, influential people in politics. And so we're waiting to see if there's money. And it could be that money is going to get dumped in races that we are supporting, or races we don't even know about. And there could be money coming in and dropped in at the last minute, which happens a lot in politics. Negative mailers, positive mailers for the challengers, so we don't quite know. And Elena Espy and Henrico put in there the parent party. I don't know much about it again, but again, there are a lot of groups out there who are now looking at putting money into education.
Yeah, and then if you go to the We the People for Education website, it looks very centrist. As Nancy mentioned, on their board, they have there's the gentleman who is the president of the Virginia Education Association. If you've ever run into Dr. Fetterman, he is quite radical. They have a former leader of the SEIU on their board. So this is not a center left, or even a centrist or even center left organization. They are very far to the left. And Nancy, I think they're a C4. They're not a PAC, but the C4 can spend money in these races as well. So that's a huge problem. One of the things I did want to point out, there's a number of questions about the Virginia School Board Association. Well, let me ask Kathleen and Dennis this. Does the school board have to join the VSBA? And are there other options out there for the school board to get support?
Can I start that off?
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
well, now I am the vice chairman of that organization, so there you go. I think that under Sherry Story's leadership, we have really gotten a great start at providing an alternative to the VSBA. One thing that I like most about the SBMA is that it actually deals in real policies that we can pass. It talks about real choices for selecting lawyers. It actually gives a lot of tutorials for things like FOIAs, for being at risk for lawsuits, who's at risk. A lot of the questions that, frankly, I didn't have my answered in my first 6 or 8 months on the job, the SBMA has answered for me in literally a number of weeks. And along with groups like VEOA and like Middle Resolution and Webster, I think so much good information is out there, but it needs to be organized. It needs to be made available and usable for candidates and school board members. And that's where I think the School Board Member Association shines and has a great role to play in going forward, especially for candidates and for strategies for individual school board members in school boards that happen to be maybe more liberal, but even as we take control in a conservative way to help us be more effective at writing and developing policies.
Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so, we do have the SBMA, and I have actually submitted my paperwork to be a member of the School Board Member Alliance. So happy to, join that. The short answer is no, you do not have to be a member of the VSBA. The challenge is, I think, for some divisions prior to the SBMA is, some of the divisions don't have as many resources. Here in Virginia Beach, we have a $1.1 billion budget. So we don't have the same resource issues some of the other smaller divisions did. But now that we have the SBMA, happy to see them stepping forward. Haven't always been exactly enthusiastic about what the VSBA has presented.
Yeah, and the VSBA has become quite progressive in their approach to advising candidates, school board members on policy, legal matters, and so forth. So for those who are not familiar with SBMA, this School Board Members Alliance, it was started, 10 months ago, a year ago, Dennis, I can't recall exactly. By Sherry.
Just at the beginning of the year, it's actually a rollout.
Right,
was
that's
just
it.
in
Yeah.
January. And somebody asked about the website, and it is my SBMA. My SBMA. So we do have a website, and it's up and
That
running,
works.
and it's charging ahead. I think tagging on to what Kathleen said, I think a lot of school board members actually think that they get a lot more out of VSBA than they get. The policy support we get is dubious at best, because it almost always has a left-wing twinge to it. And board docs is a very nice concept of being able to put everything online, but it doesn't take a lot of time or effort. And yet, for instance, my division pays upwards of $30,000 a year for those services.
Wow.
And I mean, just those 3 services. So if other divisions were to pool their efforts and hire a lawyer for various divisions in common and have our own policy experts and writers, we could actually do it cheaper, and we certainly could do it better.
Yeah, one of the things that happens with the VSBA is they have a lobbying group. And that comes down, and they pay these lobbyists a lot of money to come down and fight for policies that are not helpful for our children in a lot of cases. We've gone up against the VSBA on education choice policy. So they're down there, and they are fighting for them. They're fighting for the administrations. They're not fighting for the children, from what has been my observation. So, and the big difference, and I'm not sure if it was clear, is the VSBA, the school board has to join as a school board. On the SBMA, you can join as an individual. Is that correct? That's my understanding, correct?
Absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, the kind of our watchword when we got started was, we want you to understand what you can do as an individual school board member, not what you can't do, which was the first thing that was drummed into me when I got elected. The VSBA was telling me what powers I didn't have. I don't need to be told what powers I don't have, but that's what they were trying to con me into. So bad stuff.
Are there trainings available through the SBMA for school board members, Dennis?
Yeah, there are, and there's a portion called Classroom, where on the website there are various trainings available and various policies that are being ginned up, and schedules for other trainings that are available to members across the other organizations as well. So we hope that SBMA website can become kind of a conduit for folks to get that kind of training, or find out who does offer it.
Excellent. Yeah, we're just really thrilled that the SBMA was formed, and we want to thank you and Sherry and all the members, all the folks that are on the board. I know there's a number of them on this call, because it's a huge development. We talk to people all across the country about school boards, about education. And one of the big challenges has been that school board members have not had an organization they can go to that they trust around the country. There is a new organization also forming, and the name of it escapes me, but they're a national organization. And their goal is to provide resources and support for school board members as well, much in the spirit of what SBMA is doing. And I'm actually going to a conference at the end of the month where they're hosting a session during the conference, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that organization.
Craig, could I throw one more thing here?
Yep.
I saw that Melvin was out there. I have to say, you can imagine in my Army and diplomatic career, I've been to lots of conferences, but the conference that he held earlier this year was probably the best single conference I've ever been to in terms of information. And I mean, I was drinking from a fire hose, and they do great trainings themselves. So I'm really proud that they're on our side in this culture war, and they're doing what they're doing. So that's off to Melvin and his group, and their trainings are crackerjack. So I think we ought to make as much use of them as we can.
And Dennis is referring to the Noah Webster Educational Foundation, headed up by Melvin Adams, who's on this call tonight. And you can go. I don't know. Did Melvin, you want to put in the chat your website so people can visit you? That would be, I think, would be really helpful. And I encourage you to support Noah Webster Educational Foundation. We talked a little bit about attorneys. Kathleen, do you guys have so much money that you probably have your own attorney for advising the board? Has that been an issue for the conservatives on the board, or have you guys remedied anything that might have been a problem?
So let me make sure that I say this in a manner in which I'm not saying anything I cannot. Our problems have lessened with our attorney. We do have our own school board attorney. She tends to try to, walk the fine line with our school board. So she does have some challenges there. Not always 100% what I would like to see happen. As you had mentioned previously, sometimes the attorney is what makes it difficult for us to really move forward in the direction that we need to, because the advice is that we can't do something, and that's what the majority of the board soaks up. So, but we're moving in the right direction. So.
And Dennis, you mentioned you guys have an attorney as well in Shenandoah.
Well, we do. And one of the problems with our liberal board, they had selected a lawyer who worked with, for, and only under the supervision of our superintendent. It was totally out of whack. And one of the very first things we did was get rid of that lawyer, and we hired another one who would be a little bit more objective. As I say, I still believe that that if we hire our own attorney, we should be able to get an advocate who gives us some good challenging ways ahead, rather than kind of leaning back and being reactive at trying to deal with kind of liberal ideas as they're tossed out there. So I'm hoping that once we achieve a conservative majority, not just my division, but throughout the Dominion, that we can pick and stop being milquetoast about this, and picking some attorneys that have some guts and willing to kind of stand up for us. And I think that's a cottage industry among some attorneys. I mean, there's a market here, and I'm looking forward to see some of those bright young faces doing it.
Well, we're closing in on 8 o'clock, and I always promise that we just go an hour. So first, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Kathleen and Dennis, the Lieutenant Governor, and Nancy for speaking tonight and sharing some of their knowledge about what's going on in school boards and the school board races. I want to encourage everybody on this call to get engaged. You can learn more about Middle Resolution's candidates that they're going to be endorsing over the next month. By going to our website, middleresolution.org. We'll be announcing that on the website over time. There's a lot of candidates, so it's going to take us time to get all of them listed. And then also, I would encourage you to go to the SBMA, check that website out, the Noah Webster Education Foundation website as well. And then, of course, the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, VEOA.org. That is the organization that is really pushing hard for more education options for children. And I want to say one last thing. I want people to understand we are not opposed to public schools. We believe public schools are here to stay, and we just want to see them do a better job at educating our children. Focus on academic rigor, focus on safety, discipline. Let's educate our children properly so that they can be ready to go out into the world and be leaders, because that's who our future leaders are. So we are not opposed at all to the public education system. We're huge advocates of it. I used public education with my children, and I know many of us sitting on this chat or in this Zoom have done the same. We just need to fix some of the problems we have with our public education system. At the same time, we can advance parental rights by providing more options for parents. And I think that is the ultimate way to support parents, is give them options and education. I want to thank everyone tonight for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in a month. We're going to be doing trainings on how to write a letter to the editor, how to effectively engage with your legislator, how to engage in social media, and how you can promote a number of these issues that we've discussed tonight. So please join us over the next couple of months. We will probably move it from the first Thursday because the person who's going to do the training, she already has a commitment on first Thursday. So we may be moving it to a Tuesday. So be aware that the timing will be a little bit different, but I will definitely let you all know about that. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future.